to understand the nature of Kedushat Yerushalayim, and when we begin to look at it, there's going to be an analogy to Kedushat Eretz Yisrael, and then we'll bring it back to how that sheds light on Kedushat Yerushalayim. Let's begin with the Rambam in Chod Beit HaBechira, Perek Vav, Halacha Yud. Beit Din Sheratzu Lahosif Al Yerushalayim O Lahosif Al Ha'azara Mosifin. So there's a possibility to add to the area which is Kadosh, either to add to the area of Yerushalayim, or to add to the area of the Azara, the Makom HaMikdash. So they can do that. V'yesh lahem limshoch ha'azara ad makom sheyirtzu mehar habayit, and you can extend the Azara as much as they wanted to on Har Habayit. V'limshoch chomat Yerushalayim ad makom sheyirtzu, and to extend Yerushalayim as far as to the extent that they wish. Right? Hence, Greater Yerushalayim and Yerushalayim Rabbati. Okay, that's a political joke. Then the Rambam goes on to say to delineate the process in which that occurs. I don't want to go into that. And then he talks about the Kedusha of Yerushalayim Bizman Hazeh in the end of the Perek in Halacha Tet Zayin. He says as follows. I'm sorry, in Halacha Yud Dalet, it says Kol Makom Shelo Naseh B'Chol Elu. If these rituals were not carried out in sanctifying Yerushalayim, Ukeseder Hazeh Ein Kadosh Gamur. Right, V'zeh she'asa Ezra shtei todot zikaron hu she'asa. Right, what in Sefer Ezra we have the story of the sanctification of Yerushalayim. So that was only a zikaron because you didn't have a melech and a Sanhedrin, right? And he says, "Shelo haya sham lo melech v'lo urim v'tumim u'bamenit katsha." So if that was the case, that the Kedusha of Yerushalayim was not derived from the activities of Ezra. So he says, B'Kedusha Rishona shekidshah Shlomo, shehu kidesh ha'azara, v'Yerushalayim l'sha'atan v'kidshan latid lavo. So he understands that the sanctification that Shlomo HaMelech did in Beit Rishon of Har HaMoriah and of Yerushalayim, that Kedusha is permanent, and it did not need a reinforcement by Ezra, and not a halachic reinforcement. But Ezra did this ceremony only for sort of to rededicate Yerushalayim in people's minds, but halachically it wasn't necessary. So the Rambam's position is that the Kedusha of Har Habayit today is the Kedusha, it remains from the time of Shlomo HaMelech. Okay? The Ravid disagrees. The Ravid says, Amar Avraham, Svarat atzmo hizo. The Rambam made this up. V'lo yadati me'ayin lo. I don't know where he got it from. U'bekama mikomot b'mishnah im ein sham mikdash yirakev. Right? There's no mikdash, there's no building there, so the place has no sanctity. Okay? And therefore he says, Al Malamanda Amr Kedusha Rishona Lo Kitshal Atid Lavo. The one who holds that the first sanctification is not permanent. Lo Chilek Bein Mikdash LiYerushalayim L'Shar Eretz Yisrael. Just as the Kedusha of Yehoshua, we'll talk about this later, the Kedusha of Yehoshua was negated by the conquest of the Babylonians. The Kedusha was not permanent. That's with regards to the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. So too, the Kedusha of Har HaBayit and Yerushalayim was negated. Okay, there's no distinction between Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. Lo od el shani omer shafilu Rabbi Yossi damar kedusha shniya kitshal atid lavo lo amar el l'shar Eretz Yisrael aval Yerushalayim el mikdash lo amar. And then he says that even if you say the second kedusha of Ezra of Eretz Yisrael was permanent, but that does not count for the mikdash. And then he says, "Lefichach hanichnas ata sham ein bo kareh." Therefore, today, right, this is important. I think Rav Yoni is going to talk about this later. Today, if one was to go up to Har HaBayit, there is no chiyuv karet. In other words, the kedusha of Har HaBayit is batel, is negated today, because the Rav once said that churban, destruction, and kedusha, the way he put it, are tati desatre. They are mutually exclusive. Okay? So if it's a makom churban, it's not a makom kadosh. Okay? But the Rambam, that he explained the position of the Raiva that way. The Rambam believes that the kedusha of the place, of the location, remains, even though there is no Beit HaMikdash. Okay? And therefore, the Rambam says in Halachat Tedvav, Lefichach makrivim hakorbanot kulan, af al pi she'ein sham bayit banui. Theoretically, you could be makriv, you could bring all the sacrifices today, even though there is no standing Beit HaMikdash. Okay. So let's go back for a moment. The first point which I want to concentrate on is what he said in Halacha Yud, what the Rambam said in Halacha Yud. Now here you have to read it carefully. So there's a possibility to extend the boundaries of the Beit HaMikdash. There's a possibility to extend the boundaries of Yerushalayim. And the Rambam doesn't talk about it here, but there's also a possibility to extend the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. That's what the Rambam talks about in Hilchot Trumot. But let's just concentrate on Yerushalayim and on Har HaBayit. So let's look carefully. So he says, V'yesh lahem, I'm back in Perek Vav Halacha Yud. V'yesh lahem, referring to Beitin may, limshoch azara, they can extend the azara, ad mekom sheyirtzu may Har HaBayit. V'limshoch chomat Yerushalayim ad mekom sheyirtzu. And they can extend the walls of Jerusalem as far as they want. So it sounds like there's a distinction in the Rambam between extending the Beit HaMikdash, the Makom HaAzara, and extending Yerushalayim. When you talk about extending Yerushalayim, he says, Ad Makom She'yirtzu. Right? You can make Yerushalayim into this mega metropolis that stretches from Damascus to Nairobi, if you want. Okay? You can do that. Okay? But as far as the Mikdash, he says, Yesh lam nimshoch azara ad mekom sheyirtzu mei Har HaBayit. Because right now, the Mikdash occupies a portion of Har HaBayit, right? And there's a whole section of Har HaBayit which does not have Kedushat HaMikdash. But if they wanted to change it, they could change it. They could make the Azara larger so that it would include more of Har HaBayit. But they cannot go beyond the boundaries of Har HaBayit. Right? Yerushalayim might be mitpashet as far as you want, but the Mikdash can only go as far as Har HaBayit. Okay? So we have to understand that distinction. The next thing I want to talk about is when the Rambam talks about we have the machlok between the Rambam and the Ravid, whether you have the kedusha of the Mikdash Bizman Hazeh, and according to the Rambam, we have a certain anomaly, and we also have a certain anomaly according to the Ravid. Okay, according to the Rambam, the kedusha of Shlomo of the Mikdash was never batel; it was never negated. Okay, so we always had the Kedusha of the Beit HaMikdash. But, the Rambam holds, with regards to Eretz Yisrael, the Kedusha of Yoshua was negated. and it was only Ezra that recreated the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, right? That means we had an anomalous situation, according to the Rambam, that after Churban Bayit Rishon, until Ezra came and re-sanctified Eretz Yisrael, we had Kedushat HaMikdash in Chutz La'aretz. Right? He says that after the destruction of Eretz Yisrael by the Babylonians, he says Eretz Yisrael was like Chutz La'aretz. So you have a situation, we'll see if this is true, we have a situation where you have the Beit HaMikdash still had its Kedusha, but the Beit HaMikdash was in Muncie. Right? It was in Chutz La'aretz. Okay? So that's some people might not think that's an anomalous situation, but let's just say that it's an anomalous situation for the sake of argument, because today is Yom Yerushalayim and we're all Zionists, right? Okay. What? Yeah. All right. And there's something else which is interesting, that according to the Ravid, so the Ravid wants to tie together Kedushat Eretz Yisrael and Kedushat Yerushalayim, right? He says if you say that the first Kedusha is Batel, so that goes for Eretz Yisrael and for Yerushalayim, okay? And then he goes on to say that even if you say that we have Kedusha today from the second Kedusha, but that's only Eretz Yisrael, but it's not Kedushat Yerushalayim. So according to the Ravid, you can have Kedushat Eretz Yisrael without having Kedushat HaMikdash. That's the situation today, according to the Ravid. You have Kedushat Eretz Yisrael, Trumot U'Masrot, and Shvi'it. Maybe there are other conditions that we need as well, but fundamentally can be D'oraita today. Okay? Whereas the Makom HaMikdash, there's no Kedushat Mikdash. Okay? So according to the Rambam, you could have the Mikdash in Chutz La'aretz, and according to the Ravid, you can have Kedushat Eretz Yisrael without the Mikdash. Okay? Now, this goes against the simple pshat in the Mishnah in the beginning of Masechet Kelim, which talks about Eser Kedushot Hein, and it counts all the Kedushot going from the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael in the broadest sense and narrowing it down till you get to the Mikdash, where it sounds like there is the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael and the Kedusha of the Mikdash are sort of an organic whole. Whereas according to both the Rambam and the Ravid, seems that we can have one without the other. So we have to think about that as well. Okay? Now, in order to understand this, we have to digress and talk about the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, how we understand that, and then we'll bring it back to try to help us understand what this means about Kedushat Yerushalayim. Okay, so the Rambam says, still in Hilchot Beit HaBechira, if you look at the at Halacha Tet Zayin, right, Perek Vav Halacha Tet Zayin, he says, "V'lama ani omer b'mikdash v'Yerushalayim kedusha rishona kitshal atid lavo." Why do I say that with regards to the sanctity of Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash, the kedusha is permanent? U'b'kedushat sha'ar Eretz Yisrael, but with regards to the kedusha of the rest of Eretz Yisrael, l'nyan shvi'it u'ma'asrot v'kayotzei behen lo kitshal atid lavo. Okay, but Eretz Yisrael is not permanent kedusha. Lefi, he says, because shekdushat hamikdash v'Yerushalayim mipnei hashchina v'shchina ina b'teila.